This is the Kestrel Country Podcast, where we discuss the people, places, and events all around Kestrel Country.
I have to get my mug so I can rep my buddy. Yeah, rep Tyler's place.
Yeah. Honestly, in some ways, that might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Talking about White Pine Outfitters.
Oh yeah.
What's that? So it's funny. We had you on a year and a half ago, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And I went back and listened to it actually.
Oh, nice.
I don't want to repeat too much stuff.
Yeah.
Right. And so people should go back and listen to episode 53.
53.
That's what it was. I know. It's legit.
What episode is this?
I think this is episode 100. Which is monumental. Right?
Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Well, if it is, I'm honored. I'm honored anyway, but if it's 100, that's pretty sweet.
If it's 101, it'll be anticlimactic.
Yeah.
But so to your background, all that, we covered that really well.
Yes.
So we don't need to talk about,
me coming from Mississippi.
Since the 1800s.
Yeah.
All of that crazy stuff. Your pickup truck.
Yeah.
So I'll just give those teasers out because
people can go hear about it.
They can go hear about that in episode 53. But I was thinking this time we should talk about a little bit more about the outdoors.
Oh yeah.
We did last time.
That is probably my favorite subject, maybe second favorite, but
second favorite to what?
Probably second favorite to combat sports.
Whoa.
So boxing and jiu-jitsu.
I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah, wrestling. Real wrestling.
So where does estate planning come in?
Well,
lineup?
Of my hobbies I like to talk about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I love the outdoors.
Yeah, so White Pine Outfitters, they do a little bit. Do they do some rafting stuff?
Yeah, so Tyler actually is a buddy of mine, the owner of White Pine Outfitters, and they've got their store there in the parking lot off of Jackson Street behind Bootsers and Wells Fargo. And it's a consignment store, and they sell all types of outdoor gears. I go over there about once a week and just peruse around and see what good deal there is. And, there's always some piece of gear or clothing that I can pick up there. I actually picked up Brody a pair of Sitka pants.
Oh, really?
From there, they've got kids' clothes as well. So,
oh man, I need to get over there.
Yeah, $75 for a pair of Sitka pants, which was pretty nice. Yeah. So they've got that. Then Tyler also guides. He's got a number of different trips you can do. So you can go on the Grand Ronde River, which is in northeast Oregon. I'm sure plenty of people know where the Grand Ronde is. They'll put in at Minam. So you'll drive down, you'll go through Enterprise, and then you'll put in at Minam, and you'll run down. I think they go down to Mud Creek is where they take out, I assume. That's kind of the normal run. I did the trip in a raft a couple years ago, and it's a beautiful canyon.
You did it yourself?
I did it myself. Yeah, I put the kids in our raft, and we went with a friend, and we did that trip. But Tyler will do it, and he'll fish for steelhead and trout. And it's a great trip. I've steelhead fished on that river further down towards Boggins Oasis before. But it's apparently just an incredible steelhead fishing area, trout, all that. So Tyler will run that trip a lot. He'll also run trips on the St. Joe. He's got a lease on the river, and they've got a big wall tent. They've got a nice setup up there.
Stuff on Instagram.
Yeah. And then they'll take drift boats down that. I think they might take rafts too. I'm not sure. And they'll fish for trout, and I think, a lot of people, about the fishing on the St. Joe. Then they'll also do trips on the salmon, the lower salmon. He's got a permit to do the trip basically either from Hammer down to Heller Bar or Pine Bar down to Heller. I can't remember which one, but he'll do the lower salmon section. He's got a permit to do that for whitewater and then also fishing. Yeah. And then, and that's a great trip. I can't really recommend the lower salmon section of river more. It's beautiful. We just did it this summer. It's great. And you get on the Snake River and you end up taking out at Heller. But he also does a trip that is really cool where they'll fish for steelhead. They'll be on the lower salmon, they fish for steelhead, and then they hunt chuckers. So it's a cast and blast trip. Yeah. So anyway, I might try and get on and help guide on some of those trips. So
there you go.
Yeah. So he's always looking for somebody. So if there's anyone out there who wants to guide, Tyler's always looking for somebody. But that's a fun trip. Take a wall tent, set it up, fish during the day. He'll have a motor on the raft. They'll do a motor mount with an outboard.
Oh, really?
So you can cruise down. Yeah, actually, it's funny when you go down the lower salmon. So you do the section, you go through the lower gorge there. Then there's a confluence of the salmon and the Snake. And then once you get on the Snake, it's about 20 miles, 22 miles, something like that, down to Heller from the confluence. And actually, I have a funny story about there's a campsite at the confluence of the lower salmon and the Snake. I have a funny story about that. But once you get on the Snake, it's flat water. And there's actually one section that you might end up going backwards if the wind hits you. So a lot of people will just have a motor mount and an outboard. And if someone has it, so when we did it this summer, my buddy had a outboard. So we just tied our rafts together and then just cruised down. It was great.
That's awesome.
I just lay on one of the tubes with a beer. It was amazing. But the Snake the story about the beach that we were camped on a beach at the confluence of the Snake and the salmon. Now they'll let water out of the dam there.
Oh yeah.
And the water will go up and down. And we've done the Snake before, and we are aware of that. Like we knew that would happen. So we pulled our tents up. We thought very high from the water. So anyway, so we're hanging out. We go to bed. Around 1 o'clock, I think, in the morning, my buddy comes over my tent and he's like, "Hey, Ellis," he's like, "water's coming into our tent right now. The water's rising." So we wake up.
No way.
He had gotten up to use the restroom in the evening, and he stepped out of his tent into water. And so we ran down, made sure our boats hadn't floated away, which was our first concern. We had them tied off pretty well, but that would have been a bad day.
Yeah.
And there was another group.
So they were tied off, but they're floating, I'm sure.
Yeah, they were floating. They're floating.
Jeez.
We pulled them. Well, first what we did, we made sure they were there. Like, all right, they're not going anywhere. Then we had to wake all the kids up. Some of the kids were sleeping out on Paco pads, just out on the beach, just out in the open. So we're just like dragging the Paco pads up from the water. They're kind of waking. I'm like, what's going on? There was another group of rafters who were there actually, we had hung out with earlier today. They're actually pretty cool. They actually were related to some people down here in Moscow that I know. So it was kind of a small world thing. But they came over. They were helping us move the kids, move the tents. We get the boats pulled up. Then I took a bunch of rocks so we could see where the water line was. And we were like, is this going to keep coming up? We didn't know. So I took a line of rocks, set it at the water line. And then my buddy and I just sat there for like, I think an hour, just watching to see if the water kept coming up. And that was like the high water mark. It went down the next day, but it was pretty wild. We were like, what is happening?
How far did it come up?
I don't know. I think we put our tents are probably 25, 30 yards from the beach, probably 25 yards.
Yeah.
They were not close to the beach. They're up in the sand. Like the sand was packed down where you could see recently the water line had come up. And yeah, I think it was probably about 25 yards. And we were up in the sand where it was soft and fluffy. And, we're like, oh, the water doesn't come up this high. Like this must be as high as it gets. And it was funny because there's other camps up and down the water. We weren't the only ones who got caught off guard. The people that we were sharing the beach with, the guy that first noticed it, he was sleeping in a chair because he told me he snores a lot, and his wife's like, all right, you can't be in the tent. So he just goes and he sleeps in a chair. And he said he woke up with water coming up his shins, and one of their boats was floating away.
Oh, wow.
And he jumped in and grabbed it. And but you could see headlamps at different beaches up and down the river, like scurrying around 1 o'clock. So I think everyone got caught off guard with the water release. So
that's crazy.
It was a good time.
What time of year was that?
It was end of July.
Okay.
Yeah, it was end of July. So which is it's pretty crowded that time of year, but it was great. We had a great time. even though a lot of our water almost floated out. But all that to say, Tyler runs a trip on that section of the river, and it's pretty awesome. I would recommend it to anybody. So I think he's booked up this year, but he'll start booking trips. You can start reserving trips with him for next year now, I think. So if you just go to their website, and he'll have trips up, you can go do it. So
nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned potential, like thinking about guiding for him, doing something like that. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So how did you get into whitewater rafting, or just rafting, I guess?
Yeah.
Is it all whitewater rafting?
Whitewater rafting or rafting.
How'd you get into it? And are you guiding now?
I'm not guiding now. For him, it's just, he's a friend, and he's like, okay, well, if he's like, I might give you a call to help. I did some guide training with Exodus Rafting down in Riggins with Bill.
Cool.
And same thing, like they don't need guides, but it's sort of like if, told him like, well, if you get like a huge crowd and you need someone, like give me a call if you're trying to round somebody up. I might be able to do it. I got into it. I mean, we had always done stuff on rivers. I grew up back east.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of canoeing. And we would canoe. There was some canoeing down. I don't realize there was like one river in Mississippi you could canoe. It wasn't that great, but you go up into the Carolinas and there's rivers you can do up there. And then we had done a lot of canoeing in Canada when I was growing up. So we'd fly up to like Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and we'd canoe on rivers up there. One time I canoed down the Churchill River to Hudson Bay. So we ended up at Hudson Bay. So Churchill's actually the place that has the most
polar bear.
Yeah, polar bear. In fact, we had a polar bear come into town while we were in town. So we had driven in, we had set up camp a little bit outside, went into town. One of the dudes on the trip knew somebody there in Churchill, so he came and picked us up in a truck, and we cruised in town. We're hanging out, and we were just walking down the street, and someone was like, everyone get inside. There's a polar bear coming down Main Street. So everyone goes inside, we're waiting, and then they tranquilized it, and then we saw them
really
packing it away. A helicopter had like a long line, and there was a bundle, which was the bear, and they just go set them down in the tundra and release them. They kind of wake up after a while. But I grown up doing a lot of that. My dad grew up in South America, so he grew up in a canoe, like canoeing in the Amazon basin, in tributaries of the Amazon, and just like canoeing, fishing, hunting alligators and stuff like that. So I grew up doing a lot of canoeing. My dad was an avid canoeist and just kind of outdoorsman himself. He was a big backpacker. And so I just grew up kind of canoeing. Like we were on the river a lot. We were on water a lot. And then I moved to Idaho, went to college here. Didn't really do a lot of water stuff when I was in college because I would normally, it's during the winter. So we would, I was just kind of looking to get back on the river, and really the way to do that here is on a raft. There's not a lot of good canoe options, especially if you want to do something where you do like a multi-day trip, which is what we always did growing up, which is my favorite thing to do. So it was just kind of a natural progression.
Mostly like flat water stuff.
Yeah, it's all flat water. I mean, the water will be flowing, and but you're not really dealing with rapids, or if you deal with a rapid, I mean, you're dealing with something that in a raft you wouldn't even notice. Where in a canoe, you're like, all right, everyone, get ready. We don't want to flip. But it was just kind of a natural progression because I loved being on the river. I always loved being on rivers since I was a little kid, and that's the best way to do it here. And I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie anyway, so just the idea of doing like big rapids and stuff like that was appealing anyway, because you can't really do that. I mean, you can in a canoe, but you're gonna swim through every single rapid you go down.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't recommend taking a canoe down like the Salmon or anything, but. Yeah, that was how I got into it, and I had a friend who was really into it, and that was kind of the easy way. So I remember like going on trips with them, borrowing his raft, and then we ended up buying our own raft, and now we do it kind of as a family. One of our summer family activities is going on trips. So yeah.
So how long did it take you to get, I guess get comfortable to where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna buy my own raft and do this myself?
I did it for one season, then I started looking to buy my own raft.
Okay.
I just kind of, I didn't have any real instruction. I just kind of figured it out. I just jumped into it. You can go on YouTube, and there's guys on there who you can learn the basics of oaring and things like that. And I just kind of jumped in. I think the first time I went down the Selway River in the spring, and the water was pretty big. And so it was like a class 3. I think that section's class 3. And I never oared a raft before, and I just jumped in and made it down the river.
Nice.
So that's just kind of what I did. And yeah, just kind of figured out what worked for me, how, maneuvering the raft. And there's things you can do. And then it's best to talk with people like, Kirk Brower.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. Like, I would just ask him, like, okay, like, what do I do here? Or, I did some stuff. I remember talking to Bill Bonner, and I'm like, okay, what's the best way to approach this? But I really just kind of figured it out, most of it on my own, but with some tips from some experienced guys. So that's what I did.
And then you guys do it as a family.
We do, yeah.
You do a lot of that.
We do, yeah. So we take the kids.
How many kids do you have?
We have 4.
4 ages.
So Brody is 13. He's the oldest. And then down to Summer, who is 3.5 now. So she'll be 4 next year.
Yeah.
So
how big a raft do you need for that many people?
I've got a 16-foot raft. And then I've got it was a 14-foot that got stretched to like a 15-foot raft. I took the 15-foot raft down the Lower Salmon with 2 kids this year, and Hope and 2 of the kids. The 16-foot raft we use that when we have everyone. I mean, everyone could fit on the 15-foot raft. We did a river in Oregon called the Rogue River a couple years ago with that particular raft, and we had the 3 older kids and all our gear and stuff.
Like camping stuff and all that.
Yeah, tons of camping stuff, tons of gear.
That's awesome.
It can be a pretty luxe, palatious experience.
Does that help with family? Family dynamic, the fact that you can take all kinds of stuff.
You can take so much stuff. It's kind of absurd how much stuff you can take. And we'll bring, they're called Paco pads. It's basically like a mattress that you put on the ground. And Hope's got a fitted fleece sheet that's made by some guide out of McCall. This lady who's a river guide out of McCall, she makes these fitted sheets. And anyway, and then like a pillow. It's insane. We'll have like chairs, and we'll eat. Honestly, I feel like we'll eat better on the river than we do at home. A lot of times we'll make big, complicated meals.
You can take a cooler and
coolers, like stoves. You can take everything, man. It's insane.
That's awesome.
So,
and do you do that even with whitewater?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You just strap everything down really well, and yeah, nice. You can put a lot of stuff on a raft, and we'll take it down wherever, and it's great. Yeah, we have a great time. So
what's the season look like for that?
So I had a buddy who went down the Lower Salmon last week.
Oh wow.
Week before last.
I guess it's pretty warm right now.
Yeah, he was down, I think it was week before last as he went down. So Tellin Lloyd, if anyone knows him, he sells insurance down in Lewiston. He went down, I think it was last week maybe. So it was like end of September is when he went. Tyler's running trips like in the winter down the Lower Salmon. And the water gets really big in the spring. So in May, the water starts getting, end of May, beginning of June, the water starts getting really, really big. A lot of water flowing through there. Other rivers, you can't do that as much. Like the Grand Ronde gets really low. The Selway gets really low. The Lochsaw gets really low later in the year. Like in July, it starts to get kind of hard to go on those rivers. But it just kind of depends. But I mean, you can find a place to go most times of the year. If you want to, sometimes you might be a little cold, but yeah, you can go pretty much any time of the year.
Nice.
So yeah.
It's
a good time. Summer's the best, obviously. It's nice and hot. And
you guys end up doing a lot. How many trips do you take a year?
It depends. Multi-day trips. This year we only did one multi-day trip, but I was doing, we would be on the river for the day a bunch of times.
Okay.
So just day trips.
Yeah. Where would you normally go from here to do a day trip? My favorite one from here is just doing the Riggins Daily Run
down on the lower salmon. You put in at Riggins or just above. I like putting in just above Riggins at Shorts Bar because I hate having like the launch there in Riggins, especially if it's crowded. It's long, it's super steep, it's narrow, it's hard to maneuver. You've got people backed up. It's kind of a pain. So I just go to Shorts Bar, which is just up the river, and then we go down to Lucille and take out there. You can just do that in a day. It's a day trip. You go get up a little early in the morning, go down, do it, and then you'll be back by dinner time. Wow. So that's a good one.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, that's probably the most accessible one. I know Kirk's got a bunch of spots around, like the St. Mary's River, I think is one he talks about going on. I have never done that one. Some spots of the St. Joe are also good for a day trip. The Clearwater's fine too. That's more of a mellow float, especially, later in the year it gets a little shallow, but that's a nice mellow float on the Clearwater. It's like a float, really. You just
I know a lot of people who do that, like down by Orofino. And do it with inner tubes.
Yeah, and you can do it with a raft too. And it's just really chill. People just swimming around the boat.
Yeah,
and you can go down to the Selway. That's a longer trip to do the Selway one. That's a good long drive, but that's a fun little short section of river that you can do. So that's a good one to do while you're camping. You can go down and, wheel camp up by Selway Falls, put the raft in, cruise down to basically Lowell, and then take out, and then run back up to camp. So it's a kind of a fun day activity while you're camping. But yeah, those are good ones to do. Those are close. So yeah, I mean, honestly, talk to someone like Kirk or Bill. They've been doing this forever up here. They know all the spots and all the places and best times of year and things like that. But that's what I like to do. Those are the kind of ones I like to do.
So are you kind of, I know some people, like you said, will do it all winter are you kind of done for the year with rafting?
I am done for the year. I'm switching to hunting right now. So I'm actually going to be heading out. Later today and tomorrow, I'm trying to get all my gear together to go to elk camp. We're going to be heading out Sunday. Go try and get an elk.
What unit are you hunting?
We're hunting down by Dvorak, so 10A.
Nice.
We're going to be. I hunted the Palouse zone last couple years. Didn't have any luck. None of us had any luck. So we're going down to a different section. One of my friends used to guide elk hunting down in this particular area.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to go over there to an area he used to guide in. We got a camp spots picked out. So Sunday we'll be getting down there, setting up camp. And then Monday, do some glassing, try not to push them around too much, but glass a little bit and hopefully try and get on some elk. So then, Tuesday we can smoke something down there, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or multiple of us could smoke something, but we'll see. If one of us out of the group gets one, I think everyone's gonna be pretty stoked.
Yeah.
Because the last couple of years it's been pretty dry for us at least. So but yeah, so I'm kind of switching over to hunting right now, and then once the snow starts flying, we'll start skiing. So that's kind of my yearly liturgy. Like spring and fall, we'll hunt and backpack and stuff like that. And then the winter, we'll snow sports, so a lot of skiing. And then during the summer and late spring, start rafting and camping. So that's kind of how we break our year up.
That's one of the things, the awesome things about this area, right? Is the Northwest in general, but is all the seasons. Right?
Oh yeah,
it's like there's so much to do. It changes each season.
Oh yeah,
different. Versus I'm sure like Mississippi, it's
just kind of hot.
Just kind of hot.
And then it's a little less hot. and then it's 50 degrees.
Yeah.
And then there's a flurry and everyone freaks out and close all the schools. Like they'll close schools in Mississippi for a flurry, like where you can maybe see a couple flakes. But if it's like a full on like thunderstorm and tornadoes, they won't close school. So it's just just a little different. But yeah, I love the seasons, and it's just, you get the activities you do with it. And so it's great. So I always have something to do.
Yeah, are you getting Brody out? Is he going to elk camp or?
So, no, he went to bear camp with us this year, which was great. I shot a younger boar, a male bear. It was a color phase bear. It was like really
awesome.
pretty bear. It had black legs, and its back and torso were cinnamon.
Wow.
It was a really cool looking bear.
Awesome.
That was fun. He was down there. He was down there for that trip because school was out, and so that was fun. So he got to be there when I shot the bear, and we went down there and hauled it out and stuff like that. And so that was great. But he's not going to elk camp. And one thing I was thinking about is, my kids go to Logos, your kids go to Logos. Logos has a fall break, and so I think they need to shift that fall break a week earlier, because if they did that, then he could come to elk camp. So fall break starts, after the first. Now he could. I mean, we could go down, but the first couple days.
What is it? It's like Monday, Tuesday, the following Monday, Tuesday. Is that right for fall break?
I feel like it's maybe they have Friday off. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's half day Friday, and then
you have Monday and Tuesday off.
Yeah.
And if they had just shifted that, ideal for me would be they do a week long fall break, somewhere around October 10th.
Yeah.
So then we could go to elk camp, and then I could bring, everybody.
I know, really.
I'd take the whole family. We just set up a wall tent and just take everyone, and then there's stuff to do.
Yeah, I mean, really, everything should be focused around hunting season.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, same with the start of the year. It's like if we just pushed it back, if school started like September 15th,
yeah,
then you get
2 weeks of bow season,
archery season.
Yeah,
yeah, and then
I'm not a bow hunter, but I still endorse that. I like to backpack, and September is the best time for backpacking. It's also a good time for me to start getting in shape, start carrying like a heavy pack. Have
you bow hunted before?
I never bow hunted ever. I've never. I didn't grow up bow hunting.
Try it.
I know
that'll be the next thing you'll get addicted to.
I know. Well, fly fishing's also. I've got a fly rod. I've gone a couple times, and I know guys who are like really into fly fishing. I grew up, redneck rod and reel bass fishing with an ugly stick, know. And I still I take a little ultralight rod when I go up in the mountains and just use rooster tails and fish for salmon, and you can have some pretty good success with a rooster tail. When we were at bear camp this year, we would go down, and there's a river near where we set up camp, and we'll go down there and fish, and guys were just killing it with rooster tails, catching bull trout and big cutthroat trout and stuff like that. My buddy Ethan, I think he caught like 20 fish one day. It was insane. But so that's the type of fish. And I don't fly fish. I don't bow hunt. I'm just your hook and bullet type of slightly redneck, hunter. That's just how I grew up. And I just finding the time to do it's difficult. So I just, it looks fun. I think it looks. I mean, I'm not against
archery.
It.
Yeah,
I just would have to practice a lot. I go out and sight my rifle, and I'm like, oh, sweet, dialed in. If I can hit a target from here, I can definitely hit an animal. So
yeah, archery hunting definitely seems like, at least to be successful, it's like a year-round endeavor. It's something you kind of got. You got to be shooting all year. You got to be prepping for it.
Yeah,
which is part of the fun.
Oh yeah,
I got to reset this camera. It's this kind of funny. It only gives you a certain amount of time,
and you just got to re-up the technology.
Exactly. But yeah, so Brody's not going, but you guys are going to do some deer hunting?
Oh yeah, we're going to do some deer hunting. So I've got a little spot that I'll go to it's pretty nice. It's a friend of mine's father-in-law is a farmer, and I've shot a few whitetail on his property, and always see deer there. So we're going to set up a little blind and just go, probably what I'm thinking about doing is just taking a week, and then we'll just get up early and go sit, and then, have all his school clothes, have everything in the Suburban, and then just kind of peel out of there, try and get to school on time. And then if we shoot something, just be like, it's just, you're going to be late to school today.
Yeah. It's not a bad reason to be late.
No. So I think that's what we're going to do. So he'll do a good bit of whitetail hunting, I think. So I don't know. I've shot as many. I don't really care. If I see a big buck, I might say, okay, rock, paper, scissors real quick, see which one shoots it.
That's not a bad idea. See, I've been thinking about that this year. Ace is going to get out with me this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, this is a weird kind of dad moment where I'm like,
yeah, like, what if you see that tank
really
whitetail buck
shoot
come
a
out?
giant buck. Well, or same with elk. Like we're gonna hunt the Palouse. And
Yeah.
so we're gonna do a little combo elk deer hunting.
Yeah.
You know, first week.
Just get out and move. Are y'all gonna be camping, or are you just gonna drive up to some spots and
we're just gonna day
look
hunt,
around?
like morning
Yeah.
hunt. Yeah.
That's nice because you can do that. It's close. There's places you can go.
Exactly. Yep. But it is that like, okay, if there's a big old, like say we do
6
see
by
a bull
6
out
bull
there,
come out.
like, I always want things better for my kids than me, but
I know.
also like if he missed it,
Yeah.
I feel really bad.
I
But the
know.
same would happen the other way if I'm like,
I missed
"Son,
it. Maybe
I'm
he
gonna
should."
I'm gonna shoot that bull, and then I missed.
He's like, all right, thanks, Dad.
Yeah, I could have done that.
Yeah.
But it's so fun, man. I like. There's something about taking your kids out hunting
Oh, yeah.
and seeing their success. It's like a big part of me, I think, would rather see him
Oh,
shoot
yeah.
a big bull than having myself shoot.
Well, yeah, next year for bear hunting, I'm gonna let him. He's gonna. I probably won't even bring. I'm not even gonna bring a rifle. I'll just probably. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll bring a rifle. I don't know, but like I'll just be planning on him shooting whatever bear we see out there. So I think that's kind of the plan because I think he wants to get a bear more than anything else. I think that's top of his list. And so I said, all right, well, next year, we'll go out and you'll carry the rifle and then, you shoot whatever we see. So, yeah, hopefully he gets one next year. We'll see. But yeah, I don't know. I think Logos should evaluate some of their break stuff according to hunting season.
I mean, we live here, right? We got to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I almost pulled him out of school this year. He's a little bit behind on some of his schools, so we were like, oh, you should probably get. I was like, next year, I'm like,
probably
if they don't
after the fair.
Yeah, after the fair. Oh my gosh.
Up.
Yeah.
Jeez, that was our first year this year.
How'd you guys like it?
It was up and down. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It's funny. Like in the moment, I think there was a lot of like, oh my gosh, we are never going to do this again.
Yeah.
Which is it might be one of the qualities of a good experience.
Yeah.
Right. You think about, I know like Steven Ranella, Meat Eater, he talks about like different levels of fun.
Oh, like type 2 fun.
He talks about like the highest level of fun is where it's like, it really sucks at the time.
Yeah.
But then looking back on it, you're like, that was awesome. And I think
you get the best stories from those.
Yeah. And I think there was a little bit of that with the fair where it was like the 5:30 a.m.
Yeah.
cold and wet washing pigs in this like chaotic environment. There's like pigs running around everywhere. You're like,
yeah.
And I was kind of like, this is insane.
Yeah.
And the kids loved that part. Like I asked every single one of my kids, what was your favorite part of the fair?
Washing the pigs?
They're like, washing the pigs early in the morning. I'm like,
that's not my favorite part.
This is like, what? And I think it was just kind of that looking back on it. It was like, oh man, remember that? It was crazy. And
yeah.
so like there's that part of it that creates that fun where you're like,
yeah,
it's early, it's hard, it's crazy. It's, it's just like, it's camaraderie. Like you're kind of all together doing this
all
thing.
the kids are doing it.
And
I was telling my kids, I'm like, hey, I was like, you guys don't complain about getting up for 5:30 for 3 days. I was like, I grew up on a farm. Like, this is what I did. I mean, I wasn't washing pigs or anything, but we were up early. We had animals. We had a chicken farm and stuff like that. And so, I grew up on a farm. So I'd tell them, like, hey, this is what I did every day. I probably didn't actually get up at 5:30 every day, to be completely honest.
It's like walking uphill both
Yeah,
ways.
but that's what I tell my kids. But yeah, no, the fair is great.
They won't have to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, no.
They don't need to know.
They don't need to know. But no, it's great. And I think it's great for the kids. It's great for a lot of reasons. One reason we like doing it is, like I said, I grew up on a farm and I really valued my experiences growing up on a farm, all the things that I had to do and learn. And, it kind of, definitely, it really shaped me to be the person that I am now. And I just wanted my kids to have some experience of that. But, we live here in town and it's a great opportunity for my kids to have kind of an exposure to agriculture. And, they have some responsibility. They gotta do some work. It's difficult, and they also can make money doing it. The fair is a great opportunity for kids to make good money,
especially the younger kids.
Like
that's what we saw this year. One of our results from it was one, I think it was all the things you pointed out, but also like not just the money that they can make, but also having to realize expenses.
Oh yeah.
And right. So like they'd get that number of like, what did my pig sell for at the auction? And then I'm like, don't forget, you gotta run up all your expenses. And they're like, wait, we spent how much on feed? Like
what?
It's a really good lesson. But the other thing is that performance too of like, hey, you got to, not only do you have to be responsible for this animal, but then like you got to go and get judged by somebody in front of a bunch of people and have that pressure of like, there's that whole aspect of it too. And then the auction part for the girls, it was also dealing with emotions.
Oh yeah.
Was some good lessons. There were a lot of tears, especially after auction day.
Yeah.
All of that. But it was like, those are good lessons. And then like, where does your meat come from and being grateful for it and realizing how much work goes into it and all of that. Right.
And that's a great thing. We always, or not the first year, but the last couple of years, we will get an extra pig. It's called a floater. And it's good. So actually the floater serves two purposes. One is if one of your pigs doesn't make weight or dies, which that happens, you have an extra pig that can fill in. Mm-hmm. But if everything goes according to plan, you've got an extra pig that now you can eat yourself. And so that's what we'll do is we'll just raise an extra pig and then butcher it. And and it's great. The other thing that I think, we're talking about pigs not making weight. My daughter, Lila, her pig didn't make weight.
Yeah. And
you talk about like disappointment and then just realizing that
work all summer.
All summer.
Yeah.
And that, and that's, if you grew up, on a farm, or you grew up around agriculture, like, about the, good years and bad years. And so, it was a good opportunity to talk to her. I'm like, sometimes you work really hard and it doesn't really go as well as you wanted. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And so then on her part, like now, okay, well, we got to sell this pig to a private buyer. So then, okay, now we got to, go down. We took a video of her asking somebody to buy her pig and then, put it out and stuff like that. And we were able to sell it, which was great. But, you can't sell it for as much because people come in there and they start throwing a lot of money around. And then she also has to realize that because the year before she sold her pig for a little over $2,000. Wow. And then this year, I think it's what we sold it for, whatever the floor price was. So she got, 600 and something or something like way less. And then she's like, well, last year I made this much. I'm like, yeah, I know, but your pig didn't make weight. And it's kind of gets compounded when it doesn't make weight because then you sell it for what you'd normally sell a pig for. It's like, this is what a pig normally would be sold for. They're just had this, they're showing it and then people are throwing money around, which is great, because you're able to support the kids and things like that. But when you sell a underweight pig, you don't normally make as much money. So it was helpful for her to have to go through that. And then think about what should we do different next year? Well, maybe what contributed to not making weight? Because my other daughter, Charlotte, her pig was on the line.
Yeah.
It was, I think, 230? Was 230 the weight?
240.
240. It was 235 last year.
Okay.
Or 230 last year, something like that. So 240. So hers was 240. It was not 241. It was 240. And they weighed it.
Put a little extra mud on this.
Yeah.
Top of this.
Yeah. It was they had to weigh it. They weighed it twice. I think maybe someone stepped on the scale a little bit, maybe to make it work. But it was on the line.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just part of it, trying to make sure your pigs get there, make weight. Yeah. You then show them and then, sell it. And it's great. Kids can also, send out buyer's letters to different businesses, trying to get them to add on. I think
we were grateful for Eifert Law.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of Eifert Law.
Yeah.
A little add on.
We always like to support kids in agriculture.
That's right.
Yeah. And I think I might even got a letter from some of your kids. I'll get letters from kids, and I'm like, if you send me a letter, even if I don't really buy a pig at the auction, maybe I might do that at some point. But if you send me a letter, I'll send you money, basically, is kind of how I view it. So, and I got some nice thank you notes from your kids too, which was awesome.
Nice. Good.
So yeah, I got those. I got those in the mail a few days ago, I think. So yeah. But yeah, it's great.
It was a good experience. Yeah, I think we'll do it again. I told the kids going into it that it was like, if we'll try it, and if they hate it or if I hate it, we might not do it again.
Yeah.
And I think the girls at least were like, it was funny because like Sophie, she was the youngest doing it, not our youngest, but she was like sobbing, in there with her pig, crying like after the auction, all this stuff, and like she seemingly was miserable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, so if you want to do it again next year, she's like, oh yeah, I definitely want to do it again next year. I'm like, okay.
All right.
Okay, I'm not. All right.
She's like, I'm gonna cry every year.
Yeah.
No, I'll cry every year, but yeah.
But no, I think some of it for us was just getting set up, figuring it out. It was like all brand new, right? Like, I have no idea what we're doing. What's it going to be like to wash a pig? What's it going to be like to weigh a pig, load a pig, all this stuff? And there's so much you learn that it's like, maybe it won't be so bad next year.
And everyone's super helpful.
Oh yeah, that was a really cool thing.
Shout out to Jim Miller.
Yeah, Jim Miller for sure. That was. The pig, what was he? Somebody nicknamed him.
Yeah, I think someone was like the pig godfather. Shout out to Jim. He does so much work. He and Kathy both, and the DeWinkles as well do a ton of work. Corey DeWinkle, both of them do a ton of work, just making sure it all happens, and it's super helpful. But yeah, you get people who've done it before, and everyone pitches in. It helps. It's also great, and you have some of the older kids helping the younger kids, which is also another great aspect to it. They're helping guide them, so they're learning stuff there as well. So
it was cool. It was like this year I didn't bow hunt last year either, so it didn't, but I was saying, man, it would be almost impossible to bow hunt that time of year.
Oh yeah.
And do the fair. So we'll see what wins out next year.
Yeah.
I'd really like to get back to bow hunting.
Get back to bow hunting.
Maybe we'll, if rifle hunting's successful this year, I don't know, maybe I'll stick with it for a little bit. But
oh yeah.
It's hard not to want to bow hunt.
Oh yeah, no. Like I said, I've never bow hunted, but it seems like it's cool. It looks really cool. It looks a little harder, to be honest with you, than rifle hunting.
Yeah, it's hard, but I don't know. There's the aspect of just shooting a bow, like just archery, which is super fun. Mm-hmm. I think that's part of the allure of it. Is the whole year round, like going out and shooting your rifle all the time. One, it's expensive. Two, it's like hard to find a spot to do it. It's kind of loud. It's kind of like depending on the rifle, it can be punishing. On your shoulder.
You're shooting a 300.
Whereas like archery,
mag.
It's like almost this like zen. Just very. It's like a calm, quiet. It's a fun. Like it's just one of those activities that you just get in the groove of doing it, and it's pretty fun. I do miss it right now.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's just too many things.
There are too many things. There's too many things going on.
Like work sometimes.
Yeah, work sometimes gets in the way of things, unfortunately.
Yeah. So how has that been going? Finding time to do all of the outdoor stuff and also balancing owning and running a single, right? Still a single member.
Yeah, still a solo
law firm.
Yeah, it is definitely challenging. Work's been going great. Good. Been very happy with it. It is a lot. It is very busy, and I think that's where, for me, definitely learning time management, delegation, building out systems in my law firm that work really well and efficiently has been very helpful. So, because a few years ago, I decided I do not want to only work all the time, but I do want to do good work, and I want to be, I want to produce a quality product. What I do is primarily estate planning. And so an estate plan, really, you can think of it as a legal product. And so I wanted to make sure I had a very good product and also had a educational component for my client. So when my goal is when a client comes in and sits down and we talk about an estate plan, when they leave, they have a decent working knowledge of what estate planning is and what their documents are and what they do. And then they get a quality product. So I wanted to have that. I didn't want to sacrifice any of that, but I also didn't want to spend all day long working, the whole, work smarter, not harder. And one of the great things nowadays is, with a lot of the technology, you can do a lot of stuff. You can be very efficient. So one of the things a few years ago, I spent a lot of time working on building out kind of this software that automates a lot of the stuff that I do. So there's different legal practice management software that is customizable. So you can go in and you can kind of customize how things work. They've got a lot of capability. I use a particular software called Clio. It's for law firms, and it has a lot, not as much as I'd like, but then you can use stuff like Zapier. I think that's how you say it. I don't think I've heard anyone ever say it, but you can use things to kind of make this software work for you, and then you can, press a button. You're like, okay, I need to follow up with people. Here's a button. Here's a calendar. A calendaring app and things like that. And so you can set stuff up so it just automatically works. Because my goal was always to push a button and then everything would just just roll out and everything would get done, at the appropriate time. You'd get reminders at the appropriate time to contact the client or to, whatever the case may be.
Is there, with like estate planning work that you do, is there a lot that's time sensitive? Or is it generally less so?
Yeah. It is not time sensitive unless it is. That's not very, I'll explain what I mean by that. Yeah. First of all, you don't know when you're going to die. Yeah. Or you don't know when you might be in an accident that renders you incompetent and incapable and needing someone to act on your behalf. So you don't know when that happens. So, in a sense, you could say, well, if we can do it right now, that's not too soon. But, most of the time, statistically, you're going to be fine. We try and get everything done within 1 month of meeting with the client. So like when you come in and sit down with me for the first time, within a month, you'll be, signing the last document of your estate plan. And at that point, you'll have a completed and executable plan that'll work for you immediately. So, we try and get that done within a month. And occasionally what'll happen, honestly, is someone will show up and they'll say, hey, so we haven't done this yet, but we're flying to Europe. So we're, I don't know, like the plane might crash into the Atlantic, which again, statistically is
statistically, you're probably much more likely to get in an accident driving home from the office. You're
much more like, you'll probably, you might die on the way to the airport, but you're probably not going to die on that plane. But still, it's an understandable concern.
Those events that at least trigger the motivation. For
exactly. Yeah. We have this big trip coming up, and,
we're taking up whitewater rafting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm probably definitely someone who needs one for sure. But yeah, someone will come in and it's like, hey, my wife and I, we're going to go on our anniversary trip. We've got this big trip planned and we want to make sure if we die on that trip, the kids are taken care of. And our trip is 2 weeks from now. I'm like, all right, well, we can get it done. The other time where it's time sensitive, honestly, is dealing with farmers around harvest. Really? So it's happened more than once where I'll have a farmer show up and they're like, I need to get this done. And his wife's like, yeah, I really want him to get done before harvest. And we're like, oh, he's like, well, I was like, well, harvest is starting, right? He's like, yeah, I'm supposed to start cutting on Monday. I'm like, it's Tuesday. I was like, all right, well, we can probably get that done.
Is that because of the perceived danger of the work of harvest, or what?
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Normally the wife is the one concerned about it, and the husband's like, oh, I've been driving this combine for 20 years. I don't think that there's a danger as much. I mean, I'm sure there's a danger anytime you're driving a vehicle, but I can't imagine. I didn't grow up around here, so I don't know.
And working with farmers is not like you've seen a lot of them passing away. During
I haven't seen a lot. I haven't seen that happen very frequently. But what'll happen is they want to get it done, and then they're like, "Well, harvest starts next week, and then I'm gone for a while, and we won't be able to get back in here." So, But one of the things I try and do is we try and make sure we've got flexibility to adapt if someone has an emergency. Occasionally, I also have a client come in, and these ones are a little, these aren't quite as much fun. But you've got a client come in, they're like, I have a terminal illness. I'm going downhill. I'm competent right now, but the diagnosis is not good that I'll be even here in a few months, and I'll definitely not be competent to sign anything in a few months. And that's one that we try and make sure that we prioritize. Yeah. So, you might have, an older lady or gentleman come in and they say, look, I've got some degenerative disease and we need, I want to get this taken care of now, before anything happens. And so we actually, that's the one that we prioritize the most, trying to get done.
Do you end up having to do much of any, I guess if you did, if people were proactive, then after death, you shouldn't really have much to do.
Exactly.
Right? But do you do much with that where somebody will say, look, my father just passed away or my spouse passed away. They didn't have it. Like, do you do probate stuff? You do?
I do a good bit of probate. That's when,
is that more time sensitive? You have to meet court deadlines?
Probate's not. No. I mean, Idaho has a time limit that you can bring a probate. It's 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And if you don't bring a probate within 3 years, then you can still bring a probate. You just have to do this thing. It's called determination of heirship. So I have to, it's not the end of the world. Like if you had a parent who died 5 years ago and you're finally getting around to dealing with it, we can still get it done. There's some more hoops you got to jump through. And, but if you're outside that time limit, there's a couple of options that you can do depending on the situation. But really, you've got 3 years. So, if someone passes away, don't feel like you have to show up that next week. Some people do. It just depends on the person. Some people like to be able to do something. It helps them process it, helps them grieve. They're like, I just need to be busy. And then other people say, I don't want to think about any of that right now. I just want to sit and, remember mom or dad. And, I want to go to all the places that we used to go to growing up. So there's not a time limit, a real time restriction when it comes to that. So, you don't have to rush in there, but I do a lot of that type of work. Ideally we wouldn't be doing probates. When I work with a client, my goal is to make sure that they have everything taken care of beforehand. And, when I'll sit down with a client, one of the things when I start off talking with a client, we'll always start with a definition of what estate planning is. And my definition is estate planning is your say in what happens to you, your family, and your assets upon death or incapacity. So it's your instructions, your say in what happens. And we always want to put as much control with the person making the plan as possible. We want to remove as much interference from outside entities as possible. And when I say it, what I mean is like government interference with that. And by government, I mean the court system and state law. So we want to remove as much interference in opinion and say in what happens with you, your family, your assets from the outside and center that on the person making the plan. And so probate is a court process. It's a process that goes through the court system. And so we don't want to do it. We want to remove as much of that as possible. Now it's not, it's not the end of the world. Like don't, get worried if your, dad or mom passed away and they didn't have an estate plan that allowed them to bypass that process. It's fine. Like we're not California. I'll say that. California's got a pretty rough probate system, but
Idaho's a pretty good place to live and die.
It is. Yeah. For a number of reasons. I mean, it sounds a little morbid, but the probate process is, it's not great. We don't want to deal with it. It's more expensive than being able to avoid it, but it's not terrible. And also in Idaho, we do not have a state level estate tax, so that we don't have death taxes in Idaho. No inheritance tax, no estate tax. Washington state, however, does have an estate tax. So when I'm dealing with Washington clients, we have to talk about, estate planning and from a tax perspective for them. But Idaho, we don't have that problem. It's only the federal estate tax that comes into play. And that is not too bad either, because back when I was graduating from law school, I graduated from law school during the Obama administration, and they brought forward a estate tax plan, an estate tax plan that made the exemption very high. So essentially, at the time, it was $5 million for an individual, $10 million if you're a married couple. So that meant that if your estate was, and you're married, I mean, if your estate was less than $10 million, you didn't pay any estate tax.
So it doesn't. It's not even a factor at that point.
The estate taxes aren't a factor. Now, the Trump administration then came and doubled that. So that made it even better for my clients. So, it used to be, okay.
So you have a lot fewer clients who have to think about federal estate taxes.
On the federal level, right now, I wouldn't say any of my clients have that problem. I mean, it's currently sitting around, I think it's 23 million for a married couple. So, I mean, if your net worth is over that, then now, if your estate is 20 million, you're going to have other issues that you need to deal with. It's a complicated estate, but estate taxes aren't part of it at that point, like immediately. Now that law is set to sunset in 2025, which means that Congress has to vote to make it permanent. And I kind of doubt that's going to happen. I think it's going to be an easy thing for the Republicans to give up because it's still a good
it would revert
situation.
Back to 10.
We would go back to the Obama. 510, but it's chained to inflation.
Okay.
So it'll be higher than 5 or 10 million, but it's just, from 2010. So, the estate tax isn't an issue there. Now, all that to say, going back to probate, we want to avoid having to go through probate. So the way we deal with that is we deal with it with using revocable living trust. There's a number of things you can do, but when I'm doing planning, we want to make sure that the client has the most power in that situation when it comes to what happens to their estate when they pass away. Now, we also want to make sure the client has a lot of power if they haven't passed away as well, because estate planning isn't just when you pass away. A lot of people think, estate planning, I'm talking about when I die. No, it's also talking about stuff that can happen while you're alive. So incapacity is the thing we're normally thinking about. So if you're unable to make decisions for yourself, you need to have a power of attorney. You need to have things set up so that someone can step in and make sure stuff, is still going correctly. Someone's able to execute your wishes if you're unable to. So, we try and make sure that the client is able to say, lay out a plan of what they exactly want to happen, and then we make that happen. So we're not getting the courts involved. We're not getting the state law involved. We're not getting, whoever, we're trying to make sure all that's taken care of beforehand. And that applies with stuff like adult guardianship. So, if someone becomes incompetent later, if you have a good, robust power of attorney, that can make it less not going to necessarily mean that you won't have to get a guardianship, but it makes it less likely you're going to have to get a guardianship, which is, again, that's an expensive process. You have to go through the court system. A judge decides who's going to be the guardian. So, with all of that, we're trying to make sure the client has the most control over what happens to them and their assets and things like that. So that's always the goal that we want to have for the client, and we want to get that to them fairly quickly. And so it's not time. There's not a court date that we have to make, but we try and make sure that they get that soon. And going back to talking about just kind of balancing life and work, we try and be as efficient as possible. One of the ways that we can do that is with a lot of the technology we have available now, which is great. And then just making sure that we've got systems in place in our firm that allow us to get things done, get it done timely, and get it done correctly. So a lot of what I did, when I was getting going, is trying to figure out ways to make sure that happens. And that's, we don't have to talk about that necessarily because, some of it's kind of boring and some of it's, and then some of it's very law specific. But, I will say there's a lot of resources that you can use to make sure that you are on top of things and make sure you're efficient.
And is that, so the estate planning, is that 90% of what you do? Is that the vast majority?
It's the vast majority. I don't know if I would say 90% of what I do. Some months it is 90% of what I do, but I do some small business law. I did a lot of small business law when I first started practicing, and I still do it. I don't do it as much anymore, but I still do, small business stuff, setting up LLCs, handling contracts, things like that. A little bit of real estate here and there. Normally with a client who's, a real estate investor who like, that's their job. That's what they do. So they're not like working with someone like you. Mm-hmm. They'll come in and be like, oh, I just worked this deal out with this guy. Here's what we're going to do. Can you draw up the documents for that?
Mostly doing contracts.
Mostly doing contracts.
Like dealing with easements and
I don't deal a lot with easements. I've done some easements and stuff like that. I don't deal with those a lot myself. It's mainly like transactional stuff. So like someone's purchasing, a commercial property.
Yeah.
Or, something like that. But I've done those a few. That's not make up the majority of, if I do real estate, I'm doing it in kind of a business context really. So yeah. Easements are a whole nother thing.
Yeah. You don't necessarily put yourself out there as like, I do real estate law.
No.
As a specialty.
We deal with real estate, obviously, in estate planning, because that's a large part of people's net worth.
For most people,
yeah.
It's a big part of it.
Yeah. So, we have to deal with that. We have to deal with making sure that property's in the trust and things like that. But I'm not dealing with complex real estate transactions or litigation or anything like that. So, I have people that I know that I work with that if someone comes in, like give me a call if you've got a real estate issue and I can direct, if you want to be directed to someone. I've worked with attorneys who do that. Same thing when it comes to like probate litigation. I've got a guy that if I have a probate good litigation, I give him a call. He practices down in Lewiston and that's like what he does. And he's very good at it. So I just give him a call and I was like, his name's Sam Creason. He practices down in Lewiston. So I'll give him a call and say, hey, I've got another probate that's going haywire. And then he'll step in and take care of it. He's very good at it. Or someone will call me and they're like, oh, I've got this issue with this probate and my brother's suing me. I'm like, I've got a guy for you, not me, but I've got a guy that you should talk to who can handle it. So, that's one of the things we try and make sure that we do in my firm because I am fairly specialized.
Specialize in
yeah.
Everything. Yeah. Which probably helps with those, like you were talking about, the systems and the ability to be efficient and have all that set up is if you're fairly focused on one area, you can get those processes in line for that one particular area.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I can do a better job for my clients being more specialized. It's just law is such a large practice. It's such a large field.
It's like a doctor. Like somebody's like, I'm a doctor. I'm like, great. Can you look at this? But
no, I can't do that. I read x-rays. And they're like, can you set this bone? I'm like, no. Like, paramedic would be better for you.
You want someone who's really specialized in what they do.
Yeah. And that's that can be a little bit of a challenge, I think, in a rural community like we live here as a smaller community. A lot of the attorneys around here do what I've heard described as front door law, which is anything that comes through the front door you do. And I remember when I first started practicing, I did a little bit of that because, you're starting out and, when I started practicing law, it was not a good time to start practicing law. It was a couple of years after the financial crisis of 2008. Lawyers were getting fired right and left from law firms because they couldn't afford to pay them. And so there was this glut in the market of guys with 3 to 5 years experience as an attorney. And then, someone like me shows up. I'm like, I just graduated from law school and I don't know anything. So it's like, no one wants to hire you then. And so then when you start your own practice, you'll take kind of anything to try and keep the lights on. But I don't know that that's necessarily the best service of your client to be, someone's like, I do criminal law, I do family law, I do estate planning, I do creditors' rights, I do real estate, I do nonprofit law. I do copyright, and that's that IP stuff's a whole nother thing, And so they're like, I do all of these things and, jack of all trades, master of none, but I just don't know that you're probably serving your client as well as if you do all those type of things. But in a small community, people think you need to do that. I don't think you need to do that. I remember when I started doing that, people said, oh, there's no way you can specialize in something. And I just don't think that's true. I think you can specialize in one thing or one or two things. and you can make that work. But it is a challenge, but I do think it is better for the client to do that, to be specialized. And as part of that, what that means is if you're going to be specialized, it's also important for serving your client to have a network of people that you can call for referrals. Like, I know we have a state litigation, I call them. If I got other types of civil litigation, and another guy or a couple guys that I'll call. If someone's got a criminal issue, I have someone to send you to. I'm actually, it's funny. One of my, the guy I normally sent people to for criminal law, just got appointed to be a judge down in Nez Perce County. So
wow.
I told him, like, man, you're leaving me hanging, going becoming a judge. I'm going to have to find someone else. But, having a network of other attorneys who are a bit more specialized in what they do is helpful. So then you can send somebody to those people. But, I think in a rural community, you can specialize, but you do need to be willing to work with other attorneys in that situation. But yeah, so we're specialized. We do primarily estate planning with a little bit of business law and real estate thrown in. And that's mainly what we do,
Yeah.
And it's been good, staying busy, but, just always trying to make sure that we're staying on top of things, staying on top of a lot of the technological advances and things. And yeah.
Are there any, you mentioned like the 2025 sunset for that estate tax exemption.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's changed in the last year or two? I mean, like, I guess, what do we say? It's been a year and a half or something since you were on last. Is there any other laws that have changed or anything that people need to be aware of? Like, here's a reason I should go talk to Ellis.
The one thing that comes to my mind, I mean, there's always little things that are happening, and there's always little tax things, some of which affect you more than others. And I'm not a tax expert, that's what an accountant is. But there are, you do need to be aware of what's going on. So, okay, here's an issue that we need to address. I need to call the accountant and figure out what needs to happen. One of the things that comes to mind in the last few years, and this has been a few years now, and I think probably a lot of people are probably aware of it, is the Secure Act. That's the thing that probably affected me the most as an estate planner, which is giving IRAs, so qualified retirement accounts, giving those away, passing those on to your kids via trust. It used to be, there's things we could do with trust to allow the trust to still have, kind of some control over the retirement asset and it pass on. But with the Secure Act, they, I'm not making a political statement when I say this, but really what the Secure Act did when it came to retirement accounts is it made sure the IRS could get more tax revenue because it's forcing you to, there's a few exceptions, but in general, you have to take all of the money in that retirement account within 10 years, which creates a tax issue because it will probably bump you up in a higher tax bracket. Whereas it used to be, you could kind of stretch out how much you received each year. You could do required minimum distributions and it's based off of your age. And anyway, there's all these calculations that the financial advisors run to try and get the least amount of money out of an IRA so you don't have a taxable event or really an adverse taxable event. But with the Secure Act, there's some exceptions, but now most of the time you have to take it all within 10 years. So if you've got, $1 million in an IRA, you got to take that all in 10 years versus, I'm 38 years old. I'll just stretch it out over my lifetime. So I'm not getting this, this big check for 100 or over 100,000 each year that's going to bump me on this tax bracket, and then I'm going to have to pay all these extra taxes and stuff like that. So
you have to do some more planning up front to figure out where.
Yeah, there's things you can do, and it's still, I think it's still actually there's some stuff going on in tax court. People are still trying to figure out exactly how best to deal with that. But yeah, if you've got that issue, it's a conversation to have about how we're going to handle it. Some of it will come down to tax considerations. Some of it will come down to relational things like I want this kid to have it, stuff like that. But that's probably that's one that comes to mind immediately. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one that comes to my mind right off the top of my head. Most of the time it's, other, a lot of times it comes down to relational issues with the children, which, that isn't so much a legal thing unless you've got a guardianship issue. Like you've got a child that's got developmental issues and is going to need a guardian. And that's a good thing to start thinking about now as well. But there hasn't been a lot that's changed with that recently. In the last few years, Idaho's become less. They've been a little bit more reticent. The courts here in Idaho have been a little bit more reticent to just willy-nilly appoint guardians to everyone. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, going back talking about having a good power of attorney, that can be helpful, for somebody. But if you've got a child that's got a developmental issue that they're gonna have, then that's something to talk about too early as well. But yeah. So yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest things. Like is just talking about it early, figuring it out, calling you early, right? Everybody, it's like you don't want to think about it. You don't want to. You want to put it off. It's easy to think like, I'm not old. I'm not doing risky things. But none of us knows when we're going to die.
Yeah.
Or easy to think like, I don't have a lot of assets. Like I'm young. But the point you make about probate's more expensive anyway, and don't you want to have that plan ahead of time because if something does happen, you want to be ready and better to be prepared.
Yeah, and even if you don't have a lot of money, you can be in a car accident that renders you, incompetent. So, having a power of attorney in that situation is helpful. Having a living will, again, not to be morbid, but having a living will can be really helpful too. Is your instructions on when to remove life support can, that's all very important to have, and you don't have to have much money. I had someone ask me. I was at this conference one time. I was talking at this conference, and someone asked me when should you get estate planning documents, and I said when you turn 18.
Really?
Yeah, I said when you turn 18, and the reason is because when you turn 18, you're now an adult. So when my kids each turn 18, I'm not authorized unless they authorize me to act on their behalf. I can't take them to the doctor.
Wow, interesting.
And the doctor tell me everything. I can't my daughter Lila is I think she takes after her father. It can be a little reckless sometimes and has had multiple trips to the emergency room. And she just turned 11. She's turning 11, but she's probably been in the emergency room that many times as well. And I'll take her to the emergency room and, talk with the physician, they'll tell me everything that's going on and they'll call me and all of that stuff. But when she's 18, they're not supposed to talk to me. They're not supposed to give me details about the treatment. So when she turns 18, or when any of my kids turn 18, it's good to have that in place because if
they're incapacitated or
if you're out with Asa and you guys are out hunting and he's 18, 19 and slip, fall, hit your head on a rock, you're running him into town, and then you're talking with the physician about him. The physician's like, well, not really supposed to tell you what we're going to do. I'm not, you're not really, and you're like, I think, maybe he's, I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to receive pain meds or something like that. I don't know. I mean, you can't instruct a physician about that. They're like, well, do you have a power? No. Okay. Well, then we can't talk to you about it. So having, that's what I'm saying. Like when you turn 18 is you should at least, maybe you don't need a will. I mean, I'm not saying you turn 18, you need a will. When I was 18,
because you have a Ford Ranger to your name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I was 18, I had, a old F-150 and all of my belongings could fit in the back and there was still room. So everything to my name could fit in the back of my truck. That's all I owned. I didn't have anything. So, I don't know if you need a will or anything like that, but you do need these other documents. So, I think it's very important. And again, like you said, you don't have much money. There's other things that you still need to have taken care of.
Well, that's where maybe finish with this too, is that specialization and all of that. I think it makes so much sense. And then educating people, because you are able to live and breathe that stuff. And then it's like, yeah, we don't have a huge population in this area, but you firmly believe and can help people, way more people, right, than you probably have time to, even in a small area, if people were really doing what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
and getting it done.
There's a stat. It's somewhere around 50 or 60% of people in America don't have like a will or just, any estate planning document. That's a pretty large number, Well, let's just even say, let's not even say 60%. Let's just say, half of the people don't have the documents they need. And, you don't know when it's going to happen. You don't think it's going to happen. Maybe people aren't being out in situations where they're not doing dangerous activities. They go to work, they commute to work. They work in an office environment. Like the worst thing could happen is you get a paper cut. Then they go home and their hobby is board games or something like, you don't live a life that's going to expose you a lot, but you just don't know on that commute. Again, like you're saying, you're much more likely to die going to work than you are in an airplane. So you just don't know when it'll happen. None of us know when it'll happen. So even if you don't do reckless things, you can still, and you don't know if you're going to get sick, you can't control. I mean, control a little bit, I guess. But you some of the things that are really deadly, I don't know if I'm gonna get cancer. I try and be healthy, try and make sure I, don't do things that'll make it more likely for me to get cancer. But I just, I don't know. I've got a family history of cancer. I've got a family history of heart disease as well. I like to think, it's actually funny. A real good friend of mine had a heart attack. He's my age, so we're the same age.
I don't think that is funny, actually.
Yeah, no, it's not funny. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Funny, odd.
We made fun of him, but no. All joking aside, I mean, he and I are the same age. He's a really good friend of mine. He had a heart attack this week.
Wow.
So, I mean, at some point this week he had a heart attack. So, he's a very active person. He's one of those guys who's running up and down mountains all year, every year, and he had a heart attack. So, I mean, he had a family history of that himself, and a lot of people do, really. But he was a pretty active guy. You would think some guy that runs up and down mountains with a backpack on, packing elk and stuff like that, wouldn't be someone that's super high risk, but he had a heart attack. So that's the thing, is like, even if you're doing all the right things, sometimes you can have something like that happen. So yeah.
Well, it's always great, cheerful and encouraging to have you on.
Yeah, man.
Now I'm depressed.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. But you can control it.
That's right.
As much as, there's a lot you can do. And again, statistically, don't freak out. Statistically, you're going to be fine, but it's good to have that stuff in place.
Yeah, so, for sure. Good, man. Well, I think we covered a giant gamut of all kinds of things.
Yes, a bunch of stuff.
With that, I'll let you get to your prep for elk camp.
Yes. Thank you, man. It's fun as always.
Yeah, thanks, Ellis.
Have a good one.
Thanks for joining us. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you next week.